My father, Victor, had recently been diagnosed with kidney failure. My mother, Helen, had heard a folk remedy claiming that drinking women's menstrual blood could cure kidney failure and even restore a man's vitality. I suppressed my disgust, trying to explain to them that menstrual blood had no medicinal value and that consuming a large amount could even lead to poisoning. Victor, horrified, abandoned the idea then, but later, when he became impotent, he blamed me entirely. They claimed that if it weren't for me, they would have had a second child long ago. For that non-existent son, they stabbed me over 10 times and then, together, pushed me from the 12th floor. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day my mother advised my father to drink a bowl of rice mixed with menstrual blood. "Helen, what the hell are you feeding me?" Victor picked up the bowl from the table, glanced at the rice drenched in that ominous red liquid, and then slammed it back down. His brows were furrowed so tightly they could crush a fly. The disgust in his eyes was almost spilling over. Helen stopped what she was doing and looked at Victor reproachfully. She spoke vaguely. "It's something that can help you regain your masculine prowess." Victor eyed her suspiciously, still hesitant to pick up his chopsticks. The reason was obvious, a wave of revulsion making it impossible to swallow. After his relentless questioning, Helen finally stammered out that it was mixed with her menstrual blood. The words had barely left her lips when Victor clutched his mouth, dry-heaving twice. He slapped Helen across the face, cursing, "You vile woman, you damn witch. Are you out of your mind? This is absolutely disgusting. You want me to drink this?" Helen clutched her face, looking utterly wronged. She said, "This remedy, I heard it from a colleague at the factory. Her husband also had kidney failure, but after drinking it for a while, he became even more potent than a normal man, even 7 times a night." Helen spoke with excitement, her eyes sparkling. Hearing this, Victor seemed swayed, but still hesitated slightly. "So he called me over. 'Luna, get over here.' I was the only university student in the house. Although Victor often made decisions autocratically, he would still ask for my opinion when he was unsure. At that moment, I had just regained my composure after the terrifying sensation of weightlessness. I had been reborn. Hearing my father call, I immediately rushed over. Before my eyes was the familiar scene. Victor sat cross-legged, tossing the crimson-soaked rice bowl in front of me. He ordered, "Your mother wants me to drink her menstrual blood. She says it can cure my illness. Is it true or false?" I pinched my palm, forcing myself to calm down. The tragic end of my previous life was still vivid in my mind. This time, I wouldn't warn him. I wanted to see if this folk remedy was truly as effective as my mother claimed. After a moment, I feigned ignorance, saying, "Father, I don't study medicine, so I'm not clear about this." "But if Mother says it worked for someone else, there must be some logic to it. Would Mother really harm you?" Hearing this, Victor looked displeased, about to scold me, but Helen spoke first. Hearing my words, she immediately slapped her thigh, wailing, "Victor, you truly are heartless. Luna also said so. Aren't I doing all this for your own good? This remedy, do you know how much effort it took me to find out about it? And you still doubt me." Helen clutched the red side of her face, looking utterly devastated. Seeing this, Victor felt a bit awkward and found it difficult to say anything more. A moment later, he picked up the red-soaked rice bowl, closed his eyes, and took the plunge. He conceded, "Damn it, don't cry anymore, I'll drink it." Under Helen's expectant gaze, Victor brought the bowl to his lips, but then abruptly put it down, his face a grimace. He looked at me again, repeating, "Luna, is this really okay to drink? If anything happens to me after drinking this, I swear I'll break your legs." Victor glared at me, trying to make me stop him, but I quickly hid behind Helen, poking my head out and mumbling, "Father doesn't he believe Mother either?" Seeing Helen about to lose her temper with him, Victor finally said nothing more, held his nose, scooped a spoonful of rice, and forced it into his mouth. He didn't dare chew, he just gulped it down. By the time the bowl was empty, Helen finally looked satisfied. She moved forward, nestling into Victor's arms like a small bird, dreaming aloud, "Victor, once you're well again, we'll definitely have a son." Victor's face was ashen. He rinsed his mouth without a word. While they were engrossed in their embrace, I quietly slipped away. I was an IVF baby. When I was little, if I displeased my mother, she would whip me with a rattan cane. As she whipped me, she would curse, "I spent hundreds of thousands. How could I give birth to a cursed child like you? And you're disobedient. Do you know how many contemptuous glances I endure because of you?" I remained silent, letting her vent her anger. Victor suffered from low sperm count. It was very difficult for them to conceive naturally. To continue the family line, they had to spend a large sum of money on artificial insemination. I heard people say that when Victor found out I was a girl, he almost threw me away right there and then. But because he had already spent hundreds of thousands, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Their family fortune was depleted by this. They no longer had money for a second child. In the years that followed, they could only try on their own. But no matter what position they used, Helen still couldn't get pregnant. Gradually, due to excessive sexual activity, Victor became weaker. That's how Helen found this folk remedy. Although they were over 40, their desire for a son remained intense. But Helen didn't know that Victor's weakness wasn't entirely due to his low sperm count. Low sperm count only made it difficult for him to conceive. The real reason for Victor's kidney failure was his promiscuity outside the marriage. He was with other women almost every day, sometimes several times a day. Even an iron body couldn't withstand that. Of course, he didn't dare tell Helen about this. And I, of course, wasn't foolish enough to expose his philandering. This time, I wouldn't be the unlucky one. That night, Helen clung to Victor, ready to continue their procreation plan. Victor was still weak. He was rarely clear-headed, but he immediately pointed out, "Helen, have you been tricked? Women's menstrual blood is so foul-smelling, how could it possibly work?" Hearing this, Helen was displeased and slapped him playfully, but quickly her eyes filled with excitement. She said smugly, "There's no way it won't work." I saw with my own eyes how Sarah's husband, Daniel, after drinking it, demanded her several times in one night. "You've only had it once, how could it work so quickly?" Victor probably found it reasonable and said nothing more. In reality, Victor had another reason for listening to Helen. He was afraid she would expose his low sperm count. He was very proud and naturally couldn't bear the mocking gazes of others. And so, Victor continued to eat the rice mixed with menstrual blood for several days. But exactly on the day Helen's period ended, Victor suddenly clutched his stomach, his face pale. Helen rushed to support him, asking, "Victor, where does it hurt?" He angrily kicked me, but due to his stomach pain, the kick lacked force. Helen cried out in alarm, falling to the ground from the kick. Soon, he weakly roared, "You damned bitch, are you trying to kill me? For days now, I've listened to you, and if it's not one ache, it's another discomfort. If I die, I swear I'll drag you down with me." Having said that, Victor glared at me again, not forgetting to threaten me too. "You little hussy." Helen, thinking of Sarah, dared not reply. I also remained silent, my mind constantly calculating what to do once we reached the hospital. What would happen after the doctor explained things to them? Unexpectedly, Helen slapped her head, fiercely declaring, "Let's go, we'll go to Sarah's house. That bitch must be trying to harm us. I need to get to the bottom of this and at least make her pay for our medical expenses." So, our direction changed. We arrived at the door of Helen's colleague's house. The door wasn't very soundproof. From inside, muffled sounds of a very intense battle could be heard. Helen didn't care what was happening inside. She rushed forward and pounded on the door. "Sarah, get out here." The door was opened by a middle-aged man, drenched in sweat with an unfriendly expression. The moment the door opened, the pungent smell of rusty iron wafted out from inside. Soon after, Sarah also emerged. She leaned softly against the man, her voice sweet. Seeing Helen, she greeted, "Helen, what brings you here?" Helen widened her eyes and went straight to the point. "That folk remedy you told me about before, not only did it not work, my husband felt uncomfortable all over after taking it." Hearing this, Sarah burst out laughing. She looked up at the middle-aged man meaningfully, then asked back, "Why wouldn't it work? Didn't you hear my husband's performance just now?" The strong smell of blood. Helen immediately understood, a faint blush finally appearing on her ears. Her initial aggressive demeanor diminished slightly. "But my Victor." Before she could finish, Victor impatiently cut in, "Works like hell. I've been drinking it for days, and not only is there no sign of improvement down there, but I've also been vomiting and having diarrhea. You stinking woman, who are you trying to fool?" Hearing this, Sarah's expression remained unchanged. She casually ran her index finger across Victor's shirt, then slowly said, "Brother, you can't blame me for this. It's normal to have some side effects when you use this remedy for the first time. The vomiting and diarrhea are because it's too potent and your body is too weak to handle it." The moment the words left her lips, Victor's face became even more displeased. He was about to explode in anger, but Sarah was a step ahead, offering a solution. "Don't worry, I have a way to resolve your situation. Go and brew these few Chinese herbs and drink them without interruption. They can neutralize the excess medicinal properties in your body." Once your body adapts, you won't have any more discomfort. The woman spoke seriously, sounding very logical. My parents were quickly deceived. Only I, after hearing the names of those Chinese herbs, secretly laughed inside. Eucammia bark, deer antler, epimedium, gorgon fruit? Not a single one wasn't a kidney tonic. Victor, hearing this, acted as if he had found a treasure, ordering me to quickly memorize them and buy them to brew for him. After finding a solution, they no longer thought about going to the hospital. They went home. After drinking the medicine a few times, Victor felt his body rejuvenating significantly, and he began to deeply trust this method. They spent their days in their room, passionately making love. Some time later, the company I had applied to informed me that I had been hired. I had just graduated from university that year and coincidentally couldn't stand this crazy couple anymore. But when I suggested moving out to rent a place, Victor vehemently refused. "No, have you grown wings or are you just itching to get away?" Helen also looked up, her eyes filled with displeasure. "Luna, I spent hundreds of thousands. How could I give birth to such an ungrateful child like you? If you move out, who will do the housework? Who will take care of your father and me? Moreover, if you leave, who will buy and brew your father's Chinese medicine? And what if I get pregnant? Won't you have to stay and take care of your unborn little brother?" She rattled on endlessly, as if she could list 10,000 reasons why I shouldn't leave. Not a single reason was for my benefit. As for them, I had long since given up hope. Precisely because I understood them so well, I knew I could persuade them with just one sentence. "Mom, Dad, the money I make from part-time jobs now, how can it compare to a full-time salary? If I don't go out and earn money, who will buy a car, buy a house, and find a wife for my future brother? Who will show filial piety to you?" The moment the words left my lips, my parents were immediately appeased, overjoyed. Victor waved his hand at me, quickly agreeing. He instructed, "Once you get paid, don't forget to send us money. You can go." I smiled, obediently replying, "Yes, Father." The only thing was, they needed to be alive to spend it. Given the frequency of his and Helen's sexual activity, I feared he would be utterly drained even before they conceived a child. Moreover, who knew what other diseases he might contract from what he was consuming? I also wanted to know what fate awaited them in this life if I didn't interfere. Ever since I distanced myself from my parents, I found the air around me felt a few degrees cleaner. Furthermore, the fatigue from work was nowhere near the exhaustion of being at home, being ordered around by them. But in my second month of work, Helen called. I thought they were asking for my salary, but to my surprise, she hurriedly asked, "Luna, when does your company have holidays?" Hearing this, I immediately became wary, goosebumps prickling my skin. I cautiously asked Helen, "Why are you asking?" Helen chuckled as if she were talking about something perfectly normal. "Luna, I've been trying for a whole month, but my stomach still hasn't shown any signs. I guess it's because your father isn't taking a sufficient dosage. My menstrual blood flow is too little. I've even taken blood-invigorating medicine to get as much as possible, yet I'm still tired and uncomfortable, and that amount still isn't enough. That's why I'm asking you. You're his biological daughter, and I also want you to have a little brother. It's better than using the menstrual blood of those husses outside, right?" My silence was like thunder in my ears. I almost dry heaved. I knew they were crazy, but I didn't realize they were even crazier than I thought. After a long while, I finally suppressed my anger and said with difficulty, "No holidays. You should think of another way." The words had barely left my lips when Helen immediately flared up. Almost instantly, her shrill scream pierced through the phone. "You damned hussy, am I being too kind to you by speaking nicely? Now you dare to lie to me. I've already asked around. Your company has a 5-day Labor Day holiday, so get your ass back here." My face was expressionless as I decisively confronted her, my voice as cold as ice. "I find you disgusting." Helen froze for a second, then let out a piercing roar. "Luna, if you're so brave, say it again." I sneered, doing as she wished. I said, "I find you disgusting, and I find Victor disgusting. Every second I spend with you both, I want to vomit." These words undoubtedly ignited her fury. Before, no matter how they hit or scolded me, I would endure it silently. They took it for granted that I should always obey them. My current defiance was undoubtedly challenging their authority. The phone was quickly snatched by Victor, his voice filled with murderous intent, fiercely saying, "You damn child. I order you to get your ass back here immediately, or don't blame me for being impolite." I let out a cold laugh. Go to hell. My company, my rental address, they knew none of it. As long as I didn't answer the phone, they would never be able to reach me. After I refused, Helen began to target other women. but any woman who heard her quickly waved her hands in refusal and looked at them with strange eyes. After several such attempts, Helen lost all face. They were even crazier than I thought. I don't know where she got the information, but Helen publicly started buying menstrual blood on second-hand selling platforms. What was even harder to accept was that such a bizarre thing actually had sellers. My heart was conflicted. For a moment, I wanted to warn them, but remembering the tragic end of my previous life, I told myself, don't meddle in others' affairs. I discarded my compassion. Respect others' destinies, especially for parents like mine. A few weeks later, Helen called me, triumphantly boasting, "You hussy, are you hoping I won't have a son? Let me tell you, you won't give it to me. There are plenty of people online willing to sell it to me. Just you wait, once I'm pregnant with your little brother, all of your father's and my assets will belong to him." Hearing this, I burst out laughing and asked, "What assets do you have? Poverty, ignorance, incompetence, and arrogance." "Ah, if those count, then you really have a lot to leave your son." Helen was naturally short-tempered, but since she couldn't find me, she could only spout venomous words, like wanting to beat me to death and complaining about me to the neighbors. "Luna, just wait until I catch you, I'll definitely teach you a lesson." I curled my lip, calmly replying, "All right." Then I hung up. Perhaps because they no longer needed me, Helen had called very rarely recently. I guess they were now fiercely executing their procreation plan. As for Victor, after consuming those unknown, medicinal substances, the outcome was predictable. At best, he'd suffer an illness. At worst, he'd contract a terminal disease. But I also knew their karma wouldn't come so quickly. Several months passed, and I heard nothing from Helen, but looking at her unupdated social media feed, I could guess she still wasn't pregnant. Helen was someone who couldn't keep secrets. If there was any news, she would definitely want everyone to know. Moreover, if that folk remedy could truly help with conception, she wouldn't have had to wait until now. Without their harassment, these days I lived very comfortably. One day, as I was eating lunch, Helen's call still came through. He spoke with an unprecedented tone of anxiety. "Luna, come home quickly, your father is in trouble." I spoke slowly, casually asking, "What happened to father?" On the phone, Helen was gasping, almost in tears. "He suddenly fainted, we're taking him to the hospital." After saying that, she immediately gave me the address. I promptly took a day off to go to the hospital. Of course, not out of concern for Victor, but to watch the drama unfold when I arrived. His test results were in. The doctor looked at the paper in his hand, his brows tightly furrowed. After a long pause, he sighed and said cautiously, "There are 3 pieces of bad news." Helen gripped the doctor's arm, too tense to speak. I stepped forward, calmly replying, "Dr. Chu, please just speak frankly." The doctor looked at me with a complex expression, then said in a low voice, "Due to prolonged consumption of unknown substances, the patient has developed symptoms such as rapid heartbeat, difficulty breathing, and his body is currently extremely weak." I showed no emotion, secretly chuckling. Knowing that Victor's condition was due to drinking menstrual blood wasn't enough. So I continued to ask, "Does my father have any other problems?" The doctor looked at me with sympathy. He continued, "He has abused his sexual functions and consumed tonics for an extended period, so there's a very high probability he will lose his sexual function." With each word, Helen's face grew a shade paler. She now had to lean on me to stand upright. I knew their procreation plan was completely hopeless, but it wasn't over yet. The doctor continued, "The worst thing is, the patient has contracted HIV. HIV can only be transmitted in 3 ways. You should carefully consider how he might have contracted it: sexual transmission, blood transmission, and mother-to-child transmission. It's clearly due to the issue with the menstrual blood that my father regularly drank. Social revenge acts by HIV patients are not uncommon." Hearing this, Helen's face completely drained of color. She trembled, her hand shaking, as she asked unwillingly, "Could it be a misdiagnosis?" Hearing this, the doctor looked at Helen with pity. "I'm sorry." At this moment, I could barely suppress the smirk forming on my lips. Victor's current predicament was entirely well-deserved. Leaving the examination room, Helen and I entered Victor's hospital room. He seemed to have just woken up, his lips pale, looking as if his life force had been drained. As soon as he saw me, he grabbed an object nearby and hurled it forcefully at me, not forgetting to curse. "You damned child, you still know how to come visit? I'll beat you to death." Victor was screaming fiercely, but in his current state, I doubted he could even walk 2 steps. I easily dodged the object he threw and then recounted exactly what the doctor had said to him. Victor initially didn't believe it, scolding me for cursing him, but when he saw Helen's face, he finally began to doubt. He lowered his voice, asking Helen, "Is what Luna said really true?" At this moment, Helen couldn't hold back any longer. She let out a heart-wrenching sob. "Victor, how could this happen to you?" Victor said nothing, perhaps still processing the information. I don't know how long it took before he reluctantly came back to his senses. But the first thing he did after regaining clarity was to point his finger at Helen. "You damned whore, I'm in this state all because of you. All because you found that stupid folk remedy. If we can't have a son, fine, but you've cursed me with a terminal illness. If I die, don't even dream of living, you slut." Victor roared, and I don't know where he found the strength, but he quickly lunged towards Helen. Before Helen could react, he slapped her hard, then squeezed her neck, his eyes filled with venomous hatred as if he wanted to choke her to death. But ultimately, his body lacked the strength. With just a few moves, Helen kicked Victor away. She continuously shed tears but shifted all the blame to others. "Victor, this really isn't my fault. That Sarah told me about this remedy. She definitely wants to harm us." As she spoke, she seemed to remember something else, turning her fierce gaze towards me. "And there's this bitch Luna too. It's all her fault. If she had just given me her menstrual blood in the first place, why would I have had to buy it from strangers online? Why would you have contracted HIV? It's all their fault." Their shameless words always astonished me and challenged my sense of right and wrong. Seeing them about to lay hands on me, I interrupted them first. "You two should think carefully. Mother can't have a son anymore. Your only remaining offspring is me. If anything happens to me, when you die, no one will even buy your coffins." The moment the words left my lips, they stopped their charge towards me. Although they didn't lay a hand on me anymore, their eyes held a hatred as if they wanted to torture me 1,000 times over. After this incident, Victor almost entirely unleashed his resentment on Helen, beating and cursing her daily. When I visited her, her face was always bruised. Unfortunately, I wouldn't help her. After another beating, Helen finally couldn't take it anymore and furiously went to find her colleague, Sarah. She was in a very unstable mental state, flailing and baring her fangs. As soon as she saw Sarah, she screamed, "You bitch, you tricked me." Hearing this, Sarah sneered, "I guess Victor still isn't doing well, because he believed your method. He's got AIDS now." The moment the words left her lips, Sarah immediately took a few steps back, keeping her distance from Helen. Sarah frowned, her eyes clearly showing disgust. "Then why aren't you staying far away? Don't infect me, you whore. My family has been utterly ruined because of you. If you hadn't told me about that folk remedy, how could my Victor have gotten sick?" Sarah let out a mocking laugh. "But I never told you to buy menstrual blood from other people. Your husband using your menstrual blood is a fetish. But using menstrual blood from strangers, don't you find that disgusting? How can you blame me for this? Isn't this all your own doing?" Helen was stunned. At this point, the truth was completely exposed. It turned out that Sarah's husband had a peculiar fetish. He only responded when he used her menstrual blood. The 7 times a night was precisely for this reason. But this incident was coincidentally witnessed by Helen. Sarah, afraid Helen would spread the word, fabricated a folk remedy to deceive her. She didn't expect Helen to believe it so blindly. Not only did she use her own menstrual blood, but she also bought it from others online. Yet, anyone with a bit of common sense would know. Apart from being disgusting, it was obviously unsafe to use blood of unknown origin. After Sarah finished speaking, Helen nearly collapsed while I was covered in goosebumps. She cried and lunged to strangle Sarah. "You bitch, you dared to trick me. Today I'll die with you." Just as Sarah's face turned red from being choked, a man appeared in the house and kicked Helen away. Perhaps due to recent severe physical and mental trauma, she lay on the ground, unmoving, only silently shedding tears. Sarah, coughing, looked down at her from above, her eyes full of scorn. "Lynn, you've brought this upon yourself because you're foolish. You can't blame me." With that, she slammed the door shut. Actually, Sarah was not wrong. If Helen had just gone to the hospital to verify, if she hadn't been so obsessed with having a son that she lost all sense of reason, today's events would not have happened. I felt no sympathy for her. She was entirely reaping what she sowed. Staggering away from Sarah's house, Helen returned to care for Victor, while I used work as an excuse to leave home. After this, they finally became completely quiet. Even the number of calls to me decreased. And given Victor's health condition, it would be difficult for him to live for 5 more years. He had, of course, considered gathering enough money for hospital fees to treat his illness, but he had no money, and there was no hope of a cure for this disease anyway. After several rejections from me, Victor finally opted for palliative care. A month later, Helen called me again. I thought she was calling to announce Victor's death. Strangely, her voice was very low. She mysteriously said, "Luna, I'm not infected with HIV." I didn't understand her meaning. I quietly replied, and? Helen's emotions suddenly became agitated. That's right, all the menstrual blood Victor used, I also used. He was afraid of dying, afraid of getting sick, so he made me test the poison first. But I didn't get sick. What's the reason for this? I curled my lip. What reason could there be? Besides menstrual blood, it's just sex. Victor hid it from you every day, going out with other women. It's not surprising for him to contract a sexually transmitted disease. Before I could reply, Helen seemed to realize something. Could it be? Just before he was diagnosed, he wasn't feeling well, and we didn't have relations. Thinking this, Helen clutched at it like a drowning person grabbing a straw. She asked me, "Luna, did your father hide it from me and go out with other women?" My face was expressionless as I simply hummed and then said blandly, "Could there be any other reason besides that?" Getting the answer she wanted, Helen decisively hung up the phone. I knew what would follow would be a major public confrontation. I naturally couldn't miss it, so I rushed back. As soon as I reached the door, I heard Helen's sobbing voice questioning Victor. "Victor, you're not human. I've been diligently caring for you at home, and you dared to go behind my back and seek out other women." At first, Victor wanted to argue and shift the blame, calling Helen crazy. But when she recounted the whole story and the reason for Victor's illness, his face immediately turned ashen. He no longer had his initial eloquent arguments, but instead stammered with trembling lips. "Helen, listen to me explain. It was all those women outside who seduced me. Moreover, I did it for your own good. Look, haven't we still not had a son? Finding other women was also to carry on the family line for our Wang family. Do you really want to rely on that girl, Luna?" Victor spoke with such logic and reason that Helen almost fainted from anger. Perhaps it was the first time she had been so firm. She slapped Victor across the face and questioned, "Then I ask you, what does a child you have with another woman have to do with me? Can that be asterisk my son?" Even at this point, Victor was still stubborn. "Why can't we wait until the baby is born? We'll snatch it and have it take your surname, Zhang." I truly burst out laughing when I heard this. Victor had a low sperm count. No matter how many times he tried to sow his seed, he hadn't gotten a single child. The egg hadn't even been fertilized, and he was already discussing whose surname the child would take. Helen was clearly not easily fooled. Victor's shameless words made her so angry that she burst into tears. "Victor, are you even human?" Victor outwardly feigned distress, taking Helen's hand while slapping himself with the other. "Helen, you're right, it's all my fault. I'm not human, but we've been husband and wife for decades. Now that I'm sick, you can't abandon me. Besides, I got sick because of you." Helen struggled to pull her hand away and then forcefully pushed Victor. She looked down at him, her face resolute. "You are unjust, so I will be unrighteous. You won't live much longer anyway. I don't want to take care of you anymore. Moreover, you were fooling around behind my back. Let's get a divorce." Victor was horrified. He frantically pulled Helen back, shedding tears of anxiety. "Helen, you can't just leave me." Unfortunately, Helen didn't even spare him a glance. She called out to me and walked directly away. Helen dragged me along, sobbing tragically, recounting how badly Victor had treated her over the years. Then she said, "My scolding you was only for your own good." In short, she was always the victim and everyone else was to blame. I couldn't help but laugh coldly to myself. "Luna, your father and I are getting divorced. The only family you have left in this world is me. You can't abandon me, okay?" I smiled and nodded. "Of course. But mother, go get the divorce papers from father first. Once that's done, you can move in with me." Hearing this, Helen was overjoyed, nodding repeatedly, and excitedly turned back. With Victor's personality, getting a divorce would be harder than reaching the heavens. How could he easily let go of someone who had served him like a maid for decades? Sure enough, Helen didn't contact me for a long time, probably because she was swamped with the divorce. And I also heard from relatives that they had a small quarrel every 3 days and a big fight every 2. The neighbors next door had complained about them several times. I, once again, enjoyed a period of peace. But 2 months later, Helen suddenly announced she was pregnant. On social media, in family chat groups, she frantically spread this news, saying that to celebrate, she would invite relatives and friends to a dinner in 3 days. Beneath her post was a string of congratulations, but I found it strangely odd. Helen clearly said she wanted a divorce, and even if they weren't divorced, she couldn't get pregnant. Victor's sexual function was almost zero, and what's more, he had AIDS. Having relations with him was no different than digging her own grave. Wait, I suddenly realized something. Just then, I received a call from Helen. On the phone, her voice was full of happiness. Luna, you're going to have a little brother. We're planning a party the day after tomorrow. You must come back to celebrate. I cautiously asked Helen, didn't you plan to get a divorce? Hearing this, she sighed. No divorce anymore. Your father and I have lived together for over half our lives. I'm used to having him around. It's hard to stay calm without him. I quietly hung up the phone, hoping it wasn't what I thought. 3 days later, I still arrived as planned. The scene was crowded with relatives and friends. Almost everyone they knew was there. Even Sarah, whom Helen had once hated, was invited by her. Everyone was chatting and laughing happily. The atmosphere was lively. As for me, I quietly slipped into the kitchen while no one was paying attention. I happened to catch Helen secretly adding something into the stir-fried vegetable pot. It was a very thick red color. This undoubtedly confirmed my suspicion. But when I rushed out, I found that some people had already started eating. Seeing this, I quickly snatched the microphone from the host. Stop, everyone, don't touch your chopsticks. My voice was very loud. Everyone immediately stopped and looked at me. Victor is an AIDS patient. I just saw them put something into our food. The words had barely left my lips when Victor rushed forward and snatched the microphone. He slammed it to the ground. You bitch, don't slander me. After that, he smiled apologetically to everyone, saying that it was just a joke for me. But in the crowd, the faces of several people were clearly not good. They obviously knew Victor's situation. Faced with their own lives, they became extremely cautious. Victor had just breathed a sigh of relief. I kicked him away and projected a video of Helen adding seasoning to the vegetables. Everyone's face changed color. They questioned, "What did you put in the vegetables?" "Victor, tell us quickly what you put in. If anything happens to me, I will absolutely not forgive you." Faced with everyone's condemnation, Victor appeared surprisingly calm. He even flashed a strange smile and very nonchalantly said, "Of course, it's mine." The words had barely left his lips when the scene fell silent for a few seconds, then quickly erupted into desperate screams. Especially those who had just eaten the vegetables, they immediately stuck their fingers down their throats to vomit. I advised everyone to quickly go to the hospital and take post-exposure prophylaxis. Very quickly, everyone rushed out, hurrying to buy medicine. Only I, Victor, and Helen remained at the scene. Victor looked at me with a dark gaze, smiling in an extremely bizarre way. "You damned hussy, you warned them too late." As for Helen, she still habitually blamed others. "Luna, you can't blame me for this. Your father forced me to do it. He wanted to infect me with AIDS, and I had no other choice. Besides, I'm dying soon. Why should you all get to live well? Am I right?" I was so disgusted by her words that I wanted to vomit. Before I could speak, Victor spoke again. "Luna, you haven't been infected yet, have you? Come here quickly. We're a family, we must be neat and tidy, we must die together." His eyes gleamed with an indescribable madness. Having said that, they both lunged, intending to overpower me together. But I had called the police beforehand. Just then, a large group of police officers arrived. They were quickly subdued. Perhaps feeling they were about to die, they showed no fear towards the police, and their mouths continued to scream, wanting to infect everyone. Subsequently, because this incident was so heinous, Victor and Helen were directly sentenced to life imprisonment. They wouldn't get out. They would likely die in prison within 20 years. The woman who deliberately infected Victor with AIDS was also arrested. At this point, everything finally settled down. The relatives and friends who were almost infected were all fine after getting tested. It turned out that Helen, to ensure certainty, had added the seasoning to the vegetables before they were cooked. Under high temperatures, the HIV virus had long lost its ability to infect. I finally welcomed a new beginning.